I lived and worked in Saudi Arabia for a few years back in the mid-90s. I've had some crazy experiences there, but this one was by far the most frightening. I was in a supermarket buying groceries when I noticed that this man had started following me around. I ignored him as he tried to talk to me and kept calling me Halloween Habibi, sweet baby. The man kept on asking me if I was Lebanese, but there was something menacing about how he was looking at me. Then he got on his phone and was talking very intently, all the while still watching me and following me around. Now this was a fairly big Walmart-sized store, so he was definitely making an effort to follow me, and this went on for a full 20 minutes. I was of course very nervous at this point and checked out with my items and started to leave. Just outside the door and into the corridor of smaller stores, which was very common in Saudi supermarkets, there was a group of between 10 to 15 angry-seeming men, all crowded around me. They started talking to me in Arabic. I played dumb and just kept my eyes down. I kept mumbling about my husband, hoping they would think I was not a lone woman and just let me go. I could see people were walking past and doing their best not to look at this threatening group surrounding a lone woman. Just then though, my amazing driver, a tiny little guy all of about 5'2", bowled through the middle of the group and grabbed my arm. He started yelling angrily, then started yelling at the men. "Wife, I've been waiting for you. You're so slow and stupid. And what are you guys doing, you sinful creeps?" The driver threatened to call the religious police. The men fell back at this and looked quite ashamed and confused. My driver Abdul dragged me out of there, making a big show of talking about how stupid and useless I was. I went with him and kept my head down, as I tried not to drop my groceries from the nerves. When we finally got back to his car, he turned around in the driver's seat to look at me and let out a big relieved breath. He looked terrified. When he'd seen me there all by myself, he was so frightened for me. He'd seen the men gathering in the car park outside and knew something bad was about to go down. That's when he'd realized that I was not back yet and ran in to help me. He said they had been talking about me. They thought I was a Lebanese. Now, if you don't know the significance of that, during that time there was some very bad blood between Lebanon and the Saudis. I'm ethnically Romani. I pass as white in Western countries, but pass for Middle Eastern in the East. Apparently, I have a very Lebanese nose, whatever that means. He told me there had recently been many kidnappings in the last month, with all the victims found burned alive in stacks of tires just outside the outskirts of the city. Now, Abdul was a shit shooter, but he had gone whiter than me as he told me all of this. He was genuinely shaking and afraid. So I don't think he was exaggerating at all. After that, whenever I would go out on errands, he would always come inside with me and pretend to be my husband. It was a huge risk to us both, actually. If the religious police caught us, they would have likely imprisoned us, and he would have gotten it way worse than me too. Honestly, he was such an amazing person to stick his neck out like that for an asshole like me. And I'm really grateful that he was there. So back in 2007 or so, we moved to a new house that had been off the rental market due to the previous tenant trashing it. There was still a blood stain on the carpet even and holes in the walls, but at least they were fixing it up. We were just happy to find somewhere within walking distance of everything important. As we moved in there though and started living there, strange things started to happen. Underwear and bras went missing off the line. We'd keep seeing a figure walking through our backyard. Someone even moved a bench in the yard to under our son's bedroom door and tried to break the security screen. We padlocked the gates, of course, but we'd still keep seeing this figure walking around. Well, one night when my husband was away on a work trip, I swore I could hear someone outside the house. They walked up to the fuse box. There I was, sitting in the dark with a 2-year-old little boy and some maniac, now laughing and hitting the door. Needless to say, I called the police right away. Unfortunately, it took them a whole 6 hours to arrive. The person left in the meantime. They waved it off as all a prank and did very little, honestly. Really shook my trust in the police. In the next 3 months, we had 3 different attempted break-ins, and we could just not figure out what was going on. Honestly, being young parents, we had very little to steal anyway. We took some precautions and switched out our son's curtains and had him sleep in the room with us from then on. We were very afraid at all times, and we couldn't get a feeling of security. One night, we could hear someone at the window opening the window blinds. We looked over, and there was a face there. He proceeded to start slamming the glass. Again, we called the police, while giving them a description as best we could. Once again, it took them hours to even turn up. We were chatting with them in the carport when a female police officer informed us that the light under our house appeared to be on. What are you talking about? What light under the house? It was a storage area we had put things in the day we moved, and we'd not gone in there again ever since. We'd certainly not turned on or even found the light when we went down there. The police went to investigate and basically found a nest. A bed made out of our old moving boxes with some of my underwear and bras strewn around, a stack of our son's toys, and all of our outgrown clothes. It turned out a man had been living underneath our house. The police told us to padlock that door into the storage area and left, telling us to just keep an eye out for him. The landlord ended up finding out it may have been the old tenant who had been evicted. It took me maybe another 6 months to feel safe even hanging out clothes on the line, due to the fact that it was right next to that door. Even now, many years later, I still don't like storage areas and never really feel safe around them. Last week, my boyfriend, 20 and male, and I, 19 and female, took a trip to Mexico for our anniversary on the 20th. Let it be known that we do speak a fair amount of Spanish, at least enough for us to get around comfortably. We started in Playa and moved to Cancun to hopefully get better beaches without as much seaweed. We took taxis many places, including from Playa to Cancun, about an hour drive. We'd never had any issues doing this. On our actual anniversary, Thursday the 20th, we went out and did normal daytime in Mexico things. We then went home and got ready for a big evening out. We decided to go to this place called Toro Rojo because they were known for their super nachos, and boy do I love me some damn nachos. We take off walking because according to the maps, it was not that far away. Well, we walk and walk and walk for 45 minutes. I checked the time on Google Maps. It says we'll be another hour or so walk away, or a 5-minute drive if we were to do so. It was a pretty major highway we were walking along. Well, we decided that rather than walk an entire hour, we'd hail a taxi. Honestly, I was just in a rush for some nachos and daiquiris. The taxi pulled over to the side, and we hopped in. We told the man we were going to Toro Rojo. He said he didn't know where that is, so we handed him my phone with the Google Maps location pulled up. To get there, you needed to just go straight and take a U-turn, then it would be directly on the left. So this guy starts driving down this highway. I'm watching over his shoulder, looking at the app. We're getting closer to the U-turn, but he didn't slow down at all. We pass it right by. At first, I assumed, okay, well, maybe he missed it. He did say he didn't know where it was, and I've done that same thing thousands of times before. He keeps on driving. He passes another U-turn, and then another, and now I start to worry. I take my boyfriend's phone and type out to him so the man doesn't hear. He keeps missing all the turns. Tell him it's the other way. In Spanish, my boyfriend told him to go the other way to get to the restaurant. The guy started driving faster and faster, 40 kilometers over the limit now. Mi inglés es no bien. He kept on driving and driving, passing turn after turn. I started to panic. It was getting hard to breathe. I heard my boyfriend yell out to the guy that here was good. He kept on driving though. My boyfriend yells again. Finally, the driver started to slow down at this near-abandoned stretch of road. I leapt out of the car. The man demanded 30 USD, which my boyfriend gave him happily to make him go away. We took off sprinting in the other direction. We looked on maps. The man had taken us 9 miles outside of the city. Now we're 12 miles away from our hotel. There was nothing around us at all except complete blackness and trees, and it was now 11 p.m. Thankfully, I could call my mom and dad at least, and they talked to us while we walked around this deserted stretch of road. We were walking, trying to get ourselves to a hotel so we could pull cash out and get an executive taxi. Our taxi driver had taken most of our cash as well. It was an hour walk to the nearest hotel. We were walking and walking when suddenly this red Mini Cooper started to slowly follow behind us. They rolled their window down and drove next to us, not saying anything. At this point, we were both extremely on edge. My boyfriend smacked the side of their car and screamed at them to suck his dick. They sped off and away from us. Soon after that, we came upon 2 stray dogs. We grabbed 2 rocks just in case. This broke my heart as I'm a pre-vet, but safety first. Luckily, they ended up being fairly friendly and only really wanted pets. We pet them a bit and kept on walking with them. Maybe another 20 feet or so after these dogs though, a red truck drove up next to us and asked us if we needed a taxi. It was an unmarked car clearly, not a taxi. We told him no because of this. He realized we knew he was not a real taxi and didn't start to drive away at all. He stared at us, looking angry, when suddenly those dogs came running and jumping at the car, barking extremely meanly. Luckily, they gave us enough time to escape the other way. We finally made it back to the hotel eventually and got back to safety. But frankly, I'm scared to go to Mexico ever again. Hunter/mountaineer here. It was a chilly December morning. I hiked in pre-dawn, taking about an hour and a half to go 3 miles off the beaten trails. I got to my nest about a half hour before sunrise and started to settle in. The wind kicked up and a fog rolled in that was pretty much thicker than milk. Within a few minutes, my visibility was less than 5 inches. So I'm sitting there tight, huddled up against the freezing wind, when I start to hear these twigs snapping close to me. For no apparent reason, what would normally be a rapturous sound indicative of an imminently successful hunt sent a frosty chill down my spine. I chambered around in my lever-action 30-30 as quietly as I could. I laid flat on my back, tucked against a fallen tree. The rustling was moving closer and closer through the fog, but I couldn't see what was making that noise. The sun was just starting to peek over the mountains to my east, and visibility was starting to increase just a bit. The rustling continued on, sporadic, sometimes directly in front of me, sometimes behind me or beside me, like they were encircling me. I remember laying there, rifle across my chest, thinking to myself how silly it was to react like such a coward. I rationalized to myself that bears and mountain lions were a big rarity where I was. I had likely just stumbled into a herd of white-tailed deer that had bedded down or something. I decided to sit up. The rustling stopped immediately. It was fully dawn by now. I was looking through the fog for any outline of what was there. I had assured myself that surely there must be deer all around me or something for all these noises, but there wasn't. There was seemingly nothing around. By now, the fog had started to fade away, and it was apparent to me that I was all alone in these woods. Eventually, though, the noises stopped. I hunted all that day without seeing so much as even a squirrel. Around 3 in the afternoon, after fighting the wind in an abnormally cold day, not wanting to hike out by flashlight, I decided it was about time to start the trek back to the truck. I gotta tell you, walking out of those woods was the most uneasy I've ever felt. Lawfully, once you make it back to the trail, you're supposed to clear the chamber of your rifle, but not that day. What was normally a brisk stroll through the woods, I undertook with the seriousness of an animal being stalked. I would walk, then stop and listen. I never saw or heard anything during my retreat, but somehow I could feel eyes on me, if that makes sense. Well, when I was only about 100 feet away from my truck, I rounded the very last corner, only to see hanging at eye level from a tree by a noose, a stuffed bear in a blaze orange jacket just like mine. I'm a giant, broad-shouldered outdoorsman, but needless to say, that one shook me something fierce. I got back to my truck and floored it the hell out of there. So this happened to me a few summers ago, when I was maybe 15 years old or so. One night, it was business as usual. A few of my close girlfriends and I were getting stoned on the porch of my friend's apartment. We had pretty much been smoking and drinking all day. At 15 years old, yes, please save your life lectures for the sake of this story. I was starting to feel a little bit unwell. It was getting pretty late, so I decided I was going to hit the sack and go to sleep. At this point in the summer, I'd been spending every day at her apartment and practically lived there, so I just went and crashed on one of the couches in her room. The night goes on, and at one point my friends wake me up to let me know they were going to sneak out of the window. She lived on the first floor, and her bedroom window didn't have a screen or anything of the sort on it, so we pretty much came and went as we pleased. She said to make sure to close it behind them. I did make sure to do so. At one point though, a few minutes later, apparently one of the girls opened it back up from the outside because she had forgotten something and forgot to close it behind her. I had already fallen back asleep at this point. Now, something you should probably know about this bedroom before I go any further. The couch that I was sleeping on was about 2 to 3 feet away from the window, going directly across the middle of the room. I was sleeping on the couch, so my head was on the side that was directly closest to the window. At some point later through the night, I started to hear some rustling around outside that window. I thought nothing of it at first, assuming it was my friends coming back from whatever adventure they'd just been on. It didn't start to worry me until I heard the rustling coming from inside this time, right next to where my head was on the couch. If it had been my friends, surely they would have been louder as they came through the window. Sleepily, I lifted my head up and muttered my friend's name, looking up at this presence. However, instead of seeing my friend's face there, I found myself staring directly into the dark eyes of a stranger. This man had a beanie hanging low on his head, covering his eyebrows, and a scarf that fully covered his mouth and nose. He had his arms through the window and had been feeling around on the floor. At this point, his body was halfway through already. His face was inches away from mine. We stared at each other for a brief moment. I'm sure I must have startled him as well because he didn't seem to be expecting someone there on the couch. I started screaming. The man quickly drew himself out of the window and hesitated as if he was about to run away. Instead, he reached for his belt to grab something. I started screaming even louder. I wear glasses to see and have extremely terrible eyesight, but because I had just been sleeping, I was not wearing them. To me, it looked like he was about to pull a gun from his pocket and shoot me. He pointed it at me, and I tried my best to hop off the couch and hide. I was in a panicked state though, and my arms and legs seemed to have missed the connection to my brain. Instead of hearing a gunshot, however, I realized it was only a bottle of mace, a realization that hit me fairly quickly when I felt it burning my face and in my eyes. Once I'd recovered from flailing around from that burning sensation, the man was long gone. I was so startled and freaked out that I could barely breathe. I called my friend bawling, begging them to please come home because I was all by myself. Her mother was currently out of town, and I had no idea what to do. The mace had burned my eyes badly, and I thought I was going to go blind. It hurt to even cry. I couldn't really do anything about it by myself though until they got back. When they finally returned, we soaked a washcloth in milk and laid it over my face to make the burning stop. We called the police as well. They came and investigated, took pictures of my face, the window, the floor, etc. before finally coming to the extremely smart conclusion that there had never been a man there at all and I'd just been having a delusional dream. My friends all believed me at least, but the police basically brushed it off as a bullshit call and left. For weeks after, I could not sleep. I had anxiety attacks regularly, if I even so much as thought about that man's face. To this day, I have a very difficult time sleeping next to windows opened or closed, regardless of what floor they're on. I always fear seeing some dark-eyed, mace-wielding stranger doing God knows what outside. For some context, I'm a 19-year-old college student, and earlier this past year, I decided to create a Grindr profile, because why the hell not? After all, I'm single, so I may as well be a dumb college student while I'm a dumb college student, right? My friends and I were studying late one night in their dorm room like always. All of my close friends lived together in the dorm, so their lounge was the primary hangout spot. It was a little bit after midnight, and I decided to go on Grindr. At this point, I'd been on the app for about 2 months, and had gone on a fair amount of dates by this point. When I opened the app this time, I saw I had received a message from a guy. I don't really remember what his name was, so I'll just continue to refer to him as the guy. I clicked on his profile, and he was a pretty cute dude. He had a shirtless picture, which was common, and he was attractive enough for me to get more information on him. His caption read, "In town for work." I read his bio and he explained that he was in town working. He was staying at a nearby hotel and was able to host visitors there. I replied to his message and began the typical Grindr talk. How are you? What are you into? Can you host? Etc. After talking for about a half hour or so and exchanging pictures, we agreed to meet. I must say I didn't get any indication that this guy was a catfish, nor did I get an indication I was talking to someone who wasn't who they said they were. Usually it would be pretty obvious when someone wasn't who they said they were. That's what I told myself at the very least. Whenever I decided to meet up with a guy, I'd always tell one of my friends, then share my location with them. I did so this time as well, and decided to head out on my way. This hotel was about 10 minutes away from my university. As I was driving there, the guy messaged me and asked, "Hey, so my business partner might be coming back soon. Would it be cool if we just did this stuff in your car?" It wasn't an unusual request to engage in car play, but I did start to be a bit suspicious. Why would his business partner be arriving this late? Then again though, I was out this late, so I brushed it off and continued making my way over there. I arrived at the hotel, I would say at about 1 a.m. at this point. I looked at my phone again. I had received another message from that guy. "Hey, can you pull around to the back of the hotel?" I drove into the parking lot and made my way to the back past the pool. This is when things started to get really weird. As I pulled into the back of this hotel parking lot, I noticed a guy in a red hoodie in between some cars. I assumed it was the guy I had been messaging. I pulled into one of the spots beneath a light post, about 20 feet in front of a dumpster that sat in the corner of the parking lot. By this point, the guy in the red hoodie had gone out of my sight. Instinctively, I clicked on the button to lock my doors. I checked the app and received another message from that guy. "Yeah, pull back next to the dumpster." I assumed that since I was underneath the light, he was worried we'd be caught if a guest or hotel staff saw us or something. At this point, I was starting to get sketched out though. Maybe it was just my anxiety getting the best of me. I put my car into reverse and pulled back to the dumpster and put my car in park. At this point, I was scanning the lot for this guy, but I didn't see anyone. No sight of that guy in the red hoodie either. I felt my heart rate increase, and I began to get cold sweats. I remember thinking to myself, man, maybe I shouldn't have driven out here. I checked the app again, only to see I'd received another message. "Okay, now turn your car off and get into the back seat." That was the point where my fight or flight response kicked in. Without thinking, I turned my car on and hauled ass out of there. I sped out of that parking lot as fast as my poor 04 car could go. I didn't even stop to check for oncoming traffic when I pulled out of the lot and onto the main road. I drove about 2 miles up the road, away from the hotel, and pulled into a Mickey D's parking lot. At this point, I was trembling. Maybe, though, I just overreacted. I decided to check the app again to see if the man had messaged me anything further. You know, maybe a "what the fuck, why did you leave" or something like that. But I saw the messages from that guy were gone. I assumed he blocked me, and when I checked, I couldn't find his account anywhere, so I don't really know. This leads me to believe that whatever he had planned was not good at all. Was he trying to jump me, steal my car, or maybe something even worse? Needless to say, I deleted the app after this incident. To anyone who uses any sort of dating app, be careful who you meet, where you meet, and be sure to take precautions. Our parents told us to never talk to strangers for a reason after all.